Dr. John Ryan, thank you very, very much for agreeing to be a part of the Breaking Through the Void Summit, and thank you for being here today to talk to me.
Hey, Julia, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here, so thank you very much for inviting me.
Good, good. So I am extremely excited to interview you. I really am. I'm very hugely interested actually in your topic. It's something that I read a lot about, and I'm really excited to be asking you a little bit more about it and to share that with people in the summit as well. And I first became aware of you and your work through Cryon and Lee Carroll. I'm a big fan of their work, and that's how I came to know you. But in case there's anyone watching and listening who doesn't know much about you, I'd like to just read your biography quickly, if I may, just to quickly a little bit, and then we'll launch in with your topic. So you've got a very interesting bio, I have to say. So you are a board-certified physician, an energy healer, a speaker, and visionary. Your life was transformed by a series of mystical events that led you to discover the validity of a spiritual and energy-based healing paradigm, your passion. In recent years, your work has led you to the mystical threshold of the quantum basis of DNA, its integral connection to the human spirit, and the potential of this awakening knowledge to support human evolution. Your goal is to bring this information down to earth so everyone can benefit from the emerging knowledge available in this awakening time. You are an author of the book entitled The Missing Pill and the founder of Unity Field Healing, a quantum process of conscious DNA activation. Like I said, amazing bio. I hope to have something as inspiring one day. So our topic today is well, your topic, I should say, is going to be human evolution, the ascension, and quantum DNA. What's happening on planet Earth? And I think that's so beautifully aligned to the summit, because it does feel like the world's going crazy, and yet, on the one hand, I'm quite excited about it, about where we're going, even though it feels like chaos, and whatever we can do to share, to give people insight and just maybe give them a slight difference in their worldview or personal view, I think is going to be awesome. And it sounds like your topic is going to touch upon that. So just the first question I would really love to ask is just about you, really, and how you came on this journey, and how your life was transformed by the mystical events I've just alluded to that led you to discover about the spiritual and energy healing paradigm. So would you be able to tell us that?
I would be delighted to. So, Julia, my life, I'll often say to people, when I go back in time in my life, I was not really a spiritually seeking kind of an individual. I was a student, I was in university, all this kind of stuff, and I was living my life. I inherently believed in goodness and, doing things to make the world a better place, but I was not really a seeker. And I was not interested in energy healing or anything of the sorts, much more into traditional medicine, the gifts that it can bring to people. But I started to live a series of events that today gets termed a Kundalini Awakening. A lot of people, you'll hear that term used, that people experience an energetic awakening of sorts. And what I began to live were these moments where I would live very unexplainable, kind of unusual or esoteric type things, where my body, for example, would begin to vibrate. And all of a sudden my consciousness would pop out of my physical body, and I would be in the room looking at my physical body. Yeah. It's kind of like an out-of-body experience. Yeah. And I had moments where in consciousness, I knew I could move around the room independent of my physical form. And this was shocking, to say the least, when I first, when I lived it the very first time. But it began to teach me that your consciousness exists independent of your physical body. In other words, it's in your body when your consciousness is in it and you're alive and awake. But it's not limited to that. In fact, it can completely dissociate itself and do other things. And we all do this in an interesting way in dream state. When we go to sleep at night, our consciousness literally leaves our body. It goes somewhere else, whether into dreamland or another dimension, or however people want to conceptualize that. But then I started having other experiences where I would see flashes of energy and auric fields of energy around people and living things and all kinds of things. And there's a whole bunch of the, stories I could tell, but we'll limit it to a concept and realize that as I lived this, I had to start searching for answers. And I knew the answers to what I was living didn't really lie in medicine. I'd been trained in traditional medicine and counseling and these types of things. And I knew that if I tried to bring this experience to someone who was schooled in that knowledge, they wouldn't really know how to help me. And I started to look in other places. So there were some bookstores in town I knew who had information that was more esoteric or new age, or however people like to, conceptualize that. And I went to the bookstore and I had an experience where two books literally changed their shape or luminosity in the bookstore. It was a massive bookstore, and I walked in and I thought, oh my word, how am I ever going to find what I need here? And one of the books literally magnified on the shelf as my eyes went across it. And a second book started to glow. I kid you not. And so I thought, oh my word, what's happening? And I went and took them. And one of the books was called The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. Mm-hmm. And the other book was Lee Carroll's very first book on Cryon called The End Times. And it was the only book that was published at the time. And so with those in tow, I checked out of the store and went home and started to read. And it really started to add insight, like a conscious insight to the experiences I were living. So it was very reassuring and very helpful to access that information. And I learned through that how important it is to have information. People are living these kinds of experiences pan-globally now. And a lot of people don't understand what they're living or what it's all about, and they're looking for answers and reassurance. There's a lot more available today to people, so that's great. But people still need this, and the process in evolution is changing. So we need to be updated and kept abreast, if you will, of what's really happening on the planet. So that's how it began. And then I started applying the knowledge to healing and working with people in a counseling context, or friends and family in their personal lives and in my own life. And could see the benefit of energy applications and consciousness applications to growth and evolution. And I became very intrigued with the concept of ascension and what that means. And then I started to learn about that and have experiences in meditative states that started to teach me about it. So that's kind of how it's the Cole's Note version, if you will, of how I ended up where I am today.
Absolutely fascinating. And I love what you said about going in the bookstore and just the things you needed, made themselves known to you. And isn't it brilliant when that happens, even if it's a bit of synchronicity or whatever it is, but what we need tends to come to us when we...
Absolutely true.
Good. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's for me so interesting to hear how you kind of started on this journey. I love to ask people that. So let's move on to your topic. So at the moment, the Earth is in a real state of transformation, as we've said, and people speak of the ascension as you've done, and a quantum shift of reality. Can you help us understand what's really taking place right now?
Yeah. So this is a topic I love. It's really what I think it's the most important thing happening on the planet today. And when you look at the planet in terms of a 3D reality, we're in 2017, and you turn on the news and you see crisis after crisis and all kinds of unusual events happening all over the world. And a lot of it is really desperate news. It's, stories of great tragedy and sadness. And it kind of looks like the world is falling apart, or humanity's, heading in a downward spiral of some kind or another. But in truth, it's the exact opposite that's happening. And it's not evidenced on the news. So in order to understand this, you have to dig a little deeper for yourself and really get a sense of what's happening. The ascension is a process by which the consciousness of humanity is being accelerated. And what that means is, imagine if you live at a certain level of consciousness, and then you're going to move to another level of consciousness to have a different kind of experience. Your shift from one to the other is a very chaotic process, because you're going from a reality that everybody's familiar with into something unknown. And a good metaphor to explain that is imagine if you were a flat stick man or stick woman, and all of a sudden you were going to become 3D. So you're used to moving around in 2 planes, and now you're going to have 3 planes to start moving around in and identifying with. It's going to be very hard to make adjustments from one kind of a reality to another kind of reality. So there's a process of transition that's involved in that. And in essence, what the Earth is going through is a process where it's becoming conscious of its own spiritual nature. So in other words, as a human being, whether you identify yourself as a spiritual being or not, or you believe you have a soul or a higher self-reality or not, the truth is you do. We all do. And there's no exceptions to that, from the best person on the planet, so to speak, to the meanest person on the planet. Everybody has a soul, and everybody has a connection to the inherent divinity that we carry as beings. Now, some people, that's very open and transparent, and for other people, it's very veiled and distorted and confused. So people don't necessarily understand that that's who they are. And it's that limitation on consciousness that can create choices and outcomes and things that we do as human beings. But we're moving into a place where human beings are becoming much more aware of their spiritual nature. And the second thing that's happening is it's moving from an external paradigm to an internal one. So we've all been raised in traditions where, we see a spiritual, even if you were spiritually inclined, you see God and spirit as something external to you. So here we are, little lowlings down on the planet Earth, struggling through our griefs and challenges and triumphs, and, basically supplicating ourselves to be worthy of a God, or to be worthy to be loved by a spiritual reality that we're trying to ascend to. And what's happening in the shift is we're beginning to internalize that understanding. And we're starting to know that God is not something outside, it's a force within us. And that light, we're all emanations from the Creator. No exceptions. All of us are emanations from the Creator, and that divinity, that light lives within us. And we're starting, by becoming aware of that, to manifest that more and more in the world of form. So that's a little far away from energy and energy healing and energy medicine at first, until you realize that everything that exists in the physical world is the product of an internal order of energy. In other words, your physical body, the health in it, or the relationships you have, the structure of your life, everything from your physical health to every aspect of your life and reality is a reflection of an internal order of energy. And when we've been living our lives prior to this, the only way we could change things is on that level of reality. So for example, if you had an infection, you need to take an antibiotic to treat the infection, and then that has side effects, and there's a little dance back and forth until everything equilibrates again. But when you start dealing with things energetically, what you're attempting to do is reorder the internal energy, or the internal order within the energy system that is your body and is your life, so that a different reality can manifest. And when you become aware of your spirituality or your spiritual nature, you have a place to go to access the knowledge, the power, the energy, the information, so to speak. You begin to really make that real for you. So the paradox that happens is, if you are open to it and believe in it, it becomes possible. But if you're closed to it and don't believe it and keep your mind in a state of disbelief or doubt, or, whatever, the doubting Thomas, it has a much harder time helping us the same way. So because of that, humanity is experiencing a big spiritual opening. And people talk about an awakening, or, a spiritual process of opening, or, there's different terms that people will use to describe that. But people are becoming aware of the exact things that I'm talking about. And as we go through this individually, it's not limited to us individually. It's also happening on a planetary level. In fact, on a system, on the whole solar system and galaxy, if you will. It's something that's happening on a very, very large scale. And the reason it's happening is because it's time. And to understand that, we have to just take a quick peek at the concept of a time cycle. So if you think of a time cycle, if you have, say for example, it's New Year's Eve, and it's a Saturday evening, and you're waiting for the next year to roll into being, and it's the last hour, the last minute, and it becomes midnight of the first day of the next year. That moment in time is the end of a second, it's the end of a minute, it's the end of an hour, it's the end of a day, it's the end of a week, the end of a month, the end of a year. So all of these various measurements of time come to a close at one moment. On a big galactic scale, there are time cycles. And one of them is called the Precession of the Equinoxes. And it's a 26,000-year time cycle where the central axis of the Earth and its relationship to the galactic core is rotating. So we go through ages of 12 of them, of about 2,100 years, and we know these, called the age of Aquarius, the age of Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, these types of things. And we're about to enter in, or we've entered into the age of Aquarius, if you will. And what happened is in December of 2012, December 21, 2012 is sort of a pinpoint of time that defines this, where the Earth was aligned for the first time in 26,000 years with the galactic center. And what this represents is the ending of all kinds of galactic cycles of time. And the Mayans knew this. They talked about that specific date as the end times, but they didn't really call it the end of time. They called it the end of a time cycle. And when you see what a cycle is, you realize the end of something is the beginning of something. And so when they were asked about prophecies for that new time, they said they can't give any because that time does not yet exist. It's in a new time cycle. And so the Earth is going to launch into a very different reality than the one we're in now. But when they were asked attributes of this new time, they were able to define them. And they're attributes basically of unity consciousness. So in other words, humanity becomes aware of its spiritual nature. It becomes aware of its oneness, that we're actually one collective group of beings, and that we're collected and connected to the planet, to the solar system, to the galaxy, to other civilizations who people, if they have an open mind to that kind of a thing, it's also true. And that we're part of a much greater system of life. And we're in a time now where that knowledge, that information, and the experience of that knowledge and information and the energy that comes along with it is opening to us. And so this is an energetic transition. For that to happen, the Earth has to be changed too. And so a lot of the Earth changes that we're witnessing are because on a very galactic level or a high spiritual level, the energy is being postured on the planet to begin to receive the new energy, the energy that's part of this new time cycle. And human beings are feeling that, they're aware of that. And we can see it even in 3D reality. We can see all the shifting weather patterns and earth changes and volcanoes and all these kinds of things. And we tend to attribute a lot of that to man-made things like pollution and global warming and stuff. But global warming is a reality, but it's not restricted to human involvement. The planet is warming because it's part of a time cycle and a part of a change. Now, that doesn't mean humanity is not at the urgent hour of needing to get its act together and stop polluting the oceans and polluting the airs and all that kind of stuff. Yes, that must occur. But the planetary warming is a bigger issue than that, and it's really part of something much larger in scale or spiritual orientation. And as the Earth goes through this transformation, it's affecting us physically. And our DNA has a magnetic field and a quantum field of energy. And it's in resonance with the Earth's resonance. And as the Earth is going through all these changes, its energetic vibration, so to speak, is going. And so is the vibration in the human body. And this energetic adjustment is the part of the ascension process, and it's what's creating so many of the peculiar experiences, if you will, that people are living in their body and in their health. And when you start to go through this, sometimes it will lead to positive things, healing or the removal of energy blockages and things in the body that are leading to diseases and things. But on the other side, it's a whole journey to live through this process because it creates its own set of symptoms, if you will. People call it the Ascension Symptom. And you have to learn a little bit about those so that you know that when you're experiencing them and living them, that you're not crazy, first of all, and then secondly, you know what to do to support yourself and live through them. So that's a very long answer to that question, but I wanted to give kind of a holistic synthesis.
Thank you, and I think that's really, really useful to summarize really everything in that way, because it shows exactly where we're coming from, doesn't it? And it's so and it's like everything. You can't take anything in isolation. We are a part of the whole. Everything is connected, and so perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into a question. You were talking about ascension symptoms. Can you give an example of what they are for people?
Of course, yeah. So as people start, first of all, what tends to happen is people start to become interested in things spiritual and things energetic. So your consciousness starts to shift. You start to realize what you knew yourself to be was one version of you, but your interests are changing and you're opening your mind and your experience to new things. And then life is very synchronistic and supportive, and it will bring things into your field of awareness. And you'll want to do it. You'll want to take a course in Reiki, or you'll want to learn about energy medicine, or you'll become attracted to crystals or floral essences, and you'll start wanting to use them in your healing paradigm. And so there's a shift in consciousness that begins, and that can be a little disturbing because people think, I don't know who I am. So when you start recognizing you're changing and it's okay that you're changing, you're less distressed by the fact that you're changing, and you can accept that it's actually a good thing and you can go along for the ride, if you will. The second thing is, as you start to explore these things, you will have very real energetic experience. So people will start to feel energy. They might lie down and have flushes of energy, or feel pain surface in their body, or something will happen and they will start crying out of context. They'll just, this eruption of emotion and tears will come up way, way out of proportion to the reality of what they're living. And they'll feel like they're releasing an energy. They go through it. And, we're taught traditionally to be very reserved about that kind of stuff. You don't go into a meeting and start sobbing at the boardroom table, or, sit with your family and just start crying for no reason. We're taught to be a little stoic and hold ourselves together a little bit more. But people lose control of that a little bit, and they start having these experiences, and you can judge yourself for this and think something is wrong and not right. But if you understand that this is happening, you can process it in a different way and find ways to support yourself rather than judge yourself or be negative towards yourself about it, or alarmed or worried. Then the third thing that starts to happen is people start manifesting physical symptoms as the energy changes. So people will notice things like they develop headaches that come and go. They might see energy, or be looking at someone and all of a sudden their head disappears and they see energy, or they see an aura around the person. And these kinds of things can happen, and that's a little shocking. It's never happened to you before. So you'll have all kinds of energetic type things that begin to happen. You'll go through detoxification. So if your body is holding things that are not supported in the vibration you're shifting to, your body has the innate intelligence to want to correct itself. So, for example, if you have things you want to get rid of, or energies that you want to get rid of, you may get, a cough or a cold type symptoms. You'll start coughing up mucus and clearing out congestion in your body, or, episodes of diarrhea or abdominal cramps, and, things that we more traditionally associate to symptoms, which can represent real illnesses, and that's confusing, of course, when it's happening. But there's a part of you that your intuition just kind of assures you, I find, when you're living it, and it's, yes, this is something wrong, or this is a transition and it's something that's okay. And but you'll experience things like that along the way. I've had many of those kinds of experiences myself through time. And then people will get funny things like ringing in their ears, sore joints, rashes that can come and go, these kinds of things. And then people will also have a very active dream life, or become aware of interdimensional consciousness, or remember past lives, either spontaneously or by having a regression to do that. And you become a little bit more aware of your multidimensional nature and spiritual element of who you are as a soul or a spirit. And almost everybody I've met becomes spiritual in some way. You kind of can't go through this and not realize there's a mystical side to the equation that we've been missing in science and in traditional education, in that the process, it's not just an energetic change. Energy is just energy. Everything is made of energy, even things we think of as more structural or physical. It's more than energy that's changing, it's consciousness. And the consciousness is governing the change. And you become aware of that consciousness, and that you're really the creator of your reality. So what happens with that is people become very aware of their responsibility for their creation. And historically, we've been taught of responsibility as something that it really defines who gets punished. In other words, if you're responsible for something, you're the one who's going to lose your job, or you're the one who's going to, be grounded by your parents or whatever. But responsibility in a spiritual sense is understanding. It means you're the creator. And if something is manifesting that you don't like, it belongs to you, and you can find the power to change it if you own the experience and the energy of it yourself. And so it's a very different way of seeing responsibility. It's not a punitive old energy kind of a responsibility. It's understanding your co-creatorship. You are a creator with spiritual power. You're making a version of reality, and you can edit and adjust it in the ways that it doesn't suit your magnificent or your spiritual nature. And so people become aware of this and the power of that and the need for that. And then as you move along, you learn to let go of the ego elements that keep you restricted from that. And there's a whole psychological transition and so on and so forth. And then people become aware of their multidimensional nature and the energy that's contained in that. So it's a spectrum. But again, I just kind of want to cover a whole spectrum of it because people are at different points of that journey, and as you travel along, it's nice to kind of know that what you're living is okay and it's perfect for where you are.
And it's really interesting you were saying about responsibility, and I know when I first discovered that you know I am responsible for everything, and for my
shocking, isn't it?
I actually remember just thinking, oh wow, this is really cool, because I wasn't at the mercy of the world anymore. I went, well, I can do what I like then, because I'm responsible for this. And that was a real light bulb moment for me when I went, bring it on, you know. Oh, I've had some ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but that was actually a really nice thing for me to go, yeah, okay, well, I can.
Yeah. It's a liberation that comes with it. And that's on a spiritual level, that's really, you know, what you're saying. It's when you understand you are responsible, it doesn't mean blame, it means creatorship. And then you can edit and change things. If you don't like it, you can fix it, but you just have to tap into the consciousness that's creating it and understand what you want to adjust or change.
Yeah, no, that's great. So all of this change that we're seeing, how are we kind of physically changing in response to things that we're feeling? Does it affect our DNA?
Well, that's a big question. So we'll start again with basics. So we see our body physically, and then we know that we have thoughts and feelings and things, you know, more psychological elements. So there's no human being to whom that would be a foreign concept, so to speak. But when you start to explore energy, you realize there's more to the human structure than just that. In other words, you do have a physical body, but inside that physical body, you have an etheric body. And the etheric body is a whole other field of energy. And the way that I think about it is it's like a living blueprint of energy. So you could imagine if you took the physical part and the etheric and you separated them, you'd see like a luminous blue body of energy. And people who work with things like acupuncture and the meridians and tapping and these types of things, they're working at the level of this etheric body to evoke healing or change. And but then you also have other bodies. You have an emotional body. You don't just have emotions. You actually have a full-on, you know, human-sized emotional body that holds the energy in which you have those emotions. So when you feel happy, you don't just feel happy in your heart. You feel happy in your entire field of energy. It lifts you, so to speak, the vibration that lifts you up. And you have a mental body, and you also have spiritual bodies. So people can learn all about energy medicine and how this fits into the equation, and, you know, discover the chakras and how that's connected to the energy bodies and all these kinds of things. And again, people who start learning about, or who are attuned, if you will, to the change, start to become interested in learning all this stuff. So that's why you see all these conferences and shows and books and everything that talk specifically about all of this stuff. So you kind of awaken to yourself as an energy-based being, first of all. And then secondly, you start to open in consciousness to your multidimensionality. And then this brings in an awareness of yourself, not just as the human being you know yourself to be today, but a soul that has come forth into the physical body to be you. And your real identity is your soul. It's not the human being that you are. That's just a version, if you will, or one part or one expression of your soul. But you've had many other expressions, and at the level of your soul, you have a vast array of experiences that are part of your soul's mosaic. But we go above that, and there's a connection to a higher divinity or the higher self-consciousness that governs the soul. And it takes us all the way back to the level of the creator, or what people might term the Godhead, or the source, the creator of life, the consciousness. And we build an energy continuum, if you will, like a ray of energy or a column of energy that's kind of takes us back in quantumness to that part of our essence or that part of our nature. So we begin to develop the light body, it's called, and people refer to that as the human Merkaba or the quantum field. So your energy field begins shifting and adjusting because you're integrating higher level energies into your energy system. And it's this integration that leads to some of the more peculiar symptoms we were talking about, you know, the detoxification and the ringing in the ears and the light flashes and the headaches, those types of things, because you're really bringing in more energy into your physical body and learning to live comfortably with that in your physical form.
And DNA.
DNA, okay. So actually this was amazing because as I went along on my own journey, I learned, I had seen chakras and felt my own chakras. So after a while of having all these experiences, the question of the reality of that or the mystery of that kind of faded away because I knew without a doubt that that was real. Yeah. But what I didn't understand was the connection between energy and spirituality. In other words, okay, I'm an energy, I have energy bodies and I have chakras and all that, and that's great. But how does that connect me to my divinity? How am I connected to my soul or the spiritual realm? Is it like a Wi-Fi system, or is there an energy connection, or how did that happen? Yeah. And I went through a series of really mystical visions. I can't think of any other way to explain them, like a shamanic vision, mystical vision that were conscious visionary experience. And what I was shown was when I lived an experience that I term today the mechanics of incarnation. And what happens is when you're in your soul form, if you will, be playful about it a little bit. Now you're sitting there in your soul form and you decide you're going to become a human being. There's a part of you that projects to the earth to feel the resonance and to make a decision about what your lifetime would be. In other words, what is it you're going to do in your lifetime and what are your potentials? So, you know, you're going to go down there and what is it you'd like to achieve by incarnating again? And that can be simple and complex. It could be as simple as, you know, being a man or a woman, being a mother or a father, being a nurse, being a caretaker, having brothers and sisters in your family, whatever it is. And you can kind of imagine how all these elements might become useful in setting up a play or a scenario, if you will, to help you create the reality that will support you in your own purpose for being there. And then what happens is you bring together, in this vision, I went back to this place where it was almost like a courtyard. And there was a pyramid, a translucent pyramid of light in the middle. And around the courtyard, there were doorways. And I intuitively knew in this vision that behind any doorway would be what we would call a lifetime. So if I went over and opened the door, it would be like walking into a lifetime. But it wasn't the reason I was being shown this vision. I was told not to open the door, to stand still. And I was not in a physical form when this was happening. I could see myself, but I was in consciousness. I was like a ball of light, if you will, as opposed to anything structural or physical. And I was just kind of watching the whole thing take place. And then all this energy flowed from behind the different doorways. And as the energy came, it was filling up this crystal in the middle of the courtyard. And the energy kept filling and filling and filling and filling. And then it became very luminous. And then it shot through hyperspace. And it, you know, like on Star Trek, when they go through warp speed, you know, everything, all the stars go flying by. It was that kind of a feeling. And then it landed in a crystal. And then I could see the pyramid surrounding a baby in the embryonic stage. Yeah. And as I looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is kind of, I know it's a vision, so it can be metaphoric or symbolic. I don't know that this is actually a mechanism, but it was a communication showing me that when your soul is ready to be born, it puts together the information that's going to come and be with you for your life. And that joins you when you're in the uterus of your mom and you're developing into a baby to be. And then when you're born, you have that energy and information with you. And where you carry that energy and information is in a field of energy that joins the DNA. And when you think about yourself as a human being, every cell in your body today came from that same one cell. Yeah. Okay. Unless you've had like a transplant or something, which is all okay. It's no problem if people do that. But if you think about it, and your body's in its simple form, every cell, there's not a single cell in your body today that didn't come from that single one cell that started you in the beginning. So you can easily see why there's something powerful about that, and how if there's energy and information in that one cell, how it's transmitted to every cell that will become part of you in the future. And the way I was shown this was, it's a quantum field of energy. It's not something we can see or measure or feel yet. And I say yet because the day will come when we can measure quantum things. But for now, we don't see it. We just infer that it's there. And this energy field will be part of your life. Now, what's happening in this time is, when you were born, you brought with you energy that was pertinent to this single lifetime. But because of the event of ascension and the fact that the earth is going through this transition and so on, you're opening to energy that you didn't have when you were first born. And because of that, you're doing things like remembering past lives and starting to have these unusual dreams and states of consciousness, and you're becoming aware of interstellar reality and, civilizations in the galaxy and all these kinds of things that people like to talk about. So you're expanding in consciousness to a much fuller version of who you are, and really who you are on a solar level, or on the level of your soul. And it takes us to the idea of why this is happening. And I want to take just a minute and explain that, Julie. It's a little bit different than the question we're addressing, but I think it is important.
Okay.
When the earth was evolving, there was a time when we arrived at the end of this time cycle that we talked about, where the future of the planet wasn't known. In other words, there were two possible outcomes. And one would be that humanity would have evolved to a level of consciousness that's high enough to support the transformation that we're talking about. But the other option was that it wouldn't. And if it wouldn't, what would have happened is civilization would have had to go into a collapse or a decline. And you kind of start again. It's like a refresh cycle. When in 1987, there's an event that's termed the Harmonic Convergence. And a simple way of thinking about this, it's a whole complex astrological thing and stuff, which we won't take the time to go into, but it's in my book if people want to read about it. But the essence of it is, it was a time when imagine you're the creator and you're looking at the galaxy and you're saying, okay, I'm going to measure the spiritual quotient of this planet and see if they're ready to move forward. And the answer to that was yes. And because it was yes, it means the earth had to be postured for this rapid rise in consciousness and energy. And that led to a response, a spiritual response, or a galactic response. So the earth, the energy fields of the earth were adjusted on the level of their electromagnetic nature and the Kundalini grid and other grids that are part of the earth structure. The earth was sent into a process of transition. And it's this transition and the changes in the energy of the earth and the resonance that they hold with us in our physical bodies that's evoking a lot of the changes. So people will say, well, is everybody going to go through the ascension? And I say yes. And they say, it can't be. That's not possible. Look, have you seen the news today? Yeah. And you look at these, horrific manifestations of humanity and you think, really? Like, all these people are just going to ascend somehow? There's kind of two tiers to that. There's two ways the ascension takes place. There are people who are going to live this very consciously, and they're going to live it while they're still alive in their body. So they're going to go through this transition, and they are going to live through it, and they're going to evolve into this newer consciousness while they're still in their physical body. There are other people who aren't going to do that. They're just not going to be interested or whatever, and they'll live their life. And it doesn't mean they're less of a spirit or anything like that. There's no judgment on the level of spirit. We have to let go of those concepts. They'll pass and they will come back. And when they come back, they're going to be different. And if anybody challenges that concept, I say, have you seen the children? And they say, well, yeah, I guess I kind of have. And you start looking at the kids today, and we see them in lots of ways as problems, the ADD and all the issues that children are facing, their lack of attentiveness, the autism, all the things that are part of the childhood reality of humanity today. And it's very confusing because we don't quite know how to relate to these children in the end we're coming from, because they're part of the new creation. So they're wired up a little differently, if you will. And it's for that reason we have all these kids who seem to be geniuses, these magnificent beings who are popping out Mozart tunes and all kinds of things at the age of 2 on the piano. And we also have people who are hypersensory, or who have energetic vision, or who have intuitive awareness of life on their lives on other planets and things, you know, and they're telling their parents about these things. And the parents are kind of freaked out because they think, what are you talking about? And they think the child is a little off, you know, crazy or something. So, and then they go to school and they can't focus and they can't learn, and they're not interested in learning the concepts of the, you know, the old history and the old paradigm and stuff. So it's creating all kinds of interesting things. But it's these children, think of reincarnation as a possibility. These kids are just our grandparents who are coming back as kids in a strange way, but they're coming back like this. And as we all, you know, pass and come back and pass and come back, we're going to come back in a continuously evolving form until we get to this place we're talking about. And it's not going to happen in a day or a week. It's going to take a few generations for that. But we're well into it, and we're well on the way. When you look at the world at large, a lot of the stuff that's happening is part of a dismantling, if you will.
Yeah.
Because in the new energy, there's things that just won't be supported. You know, corruption and greed and the things that can drive creation and duality consciousness of the past that we're leaving will not be supported. And as the energy goes up, these things can't exist. They're just going to start disappearing. Yeah. But the way we're going to live that out is through people are going to, you know, be whistleblowers and talk about corruption, and we're going to iron it out of the system, and we're going to create new models and new ways of doing things. And so, of course, when we understand that, we can see, well, why structures of the old energy are going to start falling apart, so to speak. And I don't think I need to convince anybody that that's happening.
I think we have evidence of that. We really have.
So that's just kind of bring it full circle and tie in the concept to what we were talking about earlier. So yeah.
And you know what, that's so fascinating you say about the children, because that's an area that I specialize in. I work with parents and with children who are
awesome. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Next year on exactly that, parenting children in the new energy, because I think it's so important that we tell people and people can understand their children on a different level, you know. So yeah, that's amazing that you brought that up.
That's brilliant. So I say on a very personal level, thank you and congratulations. Like, thank you for doing that, because it's so important that people have that understanding.
Yeah, no, it really is. So we are nearly out of time. So I just would like to ask you one more question, if I may, and that's really just to ask about your unity field healing and
Sure, yeah. So the unity field healing work that I was shown, again, this is something that came through a series of meditative visions. Yeah. And basically what happened in this is I was shown, delivered, if you will, a light template. Now, I know this is a very strange concept, but in a meditative vision, what happened was, through a series of descending light pyramids, this structure took form, and what happened was there was a dot of light came down, and it opened up into a circle, and then into a series of 2 smaller circles inside the large circle, and the smaller circles kept reproducing. So in the end, what I was left with was like this big circle with interlocking circles that began to look like figure 8s, so 8s with inside circles. And as I looked at the pattern, it formed, and there were a large circle, 2 smaller circles, and then 2 smaller circles, and then it stopped. And it kind of activated. And what happened was it popped from being in 2D in my vision into being in 3D. And light started flowing through the grid of this geometry. And as the light flowed through it, it began to turn fast around the sphere. And it was going so fast, what happened was, it's like on a car, when the car goes really fast forward and it starts to oversample, and it looks like the wheel is going backwards even though the car is going forwards. I think people have probably seen videos of that kind of thing. But what happened with the light is it was going forward and backward at the same time. And what it created was this appearance of yin and yang. So everywhere there was a circle, there was a yin and a yang symbol. And it was luminous. And I watched it, and then it kind of settled like that, and then it disappeared. And then that was it. And then a few months later, I had done a yoga session one day, and I was laying down afterwards to just integrate the experience. And this template came back into my mind's eye. And it activated again. And this time it filled with a different kind of a light. Kind of when you see artists that do representations of, interdimensional things, the angelic, crystalline looking light that's oranges and purples and blues, really pretty, pretty colors. It was full of this kind of radiance. And as it was doing its thing, my body started to react. And I was like a marionette. My arms would flail and my foot would kick. And I kind of went through this whole series of adjustments. And then that went on for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then I just laid there. And then about 7 or 8 months later, I lived an experience where I was in a big conference in Arkansas, where there's a big crystal foundation in the earth. There's this big mountain of quartz crystal that's part of the grid of the earth there. And in this meditation, I had a phenomenal experience. And what happened was, it was like the top of my head opened and I could see the center of the galaxy. And so it was like I could see the top and the bottom of creation all at the same time. And I had this impression, I was standing on the surface of the earth looking up through the cosmos. And then the spirals of the galaxy, how they twist around, there was this experience where it was like the rays of light came down from the spiral and flushed energy over the earth. And I could feel this enormous, unbelievable wave of love. And I was sitting in the chair, and I've never felt love like that. I was awash in this love vibration. And then it kind of disappeared. And then the next thing I saw was this crystalline staircase. And it was like it was inviting me up in the vision. And I remember very distinctly, I was at the bottom of it. I was standing at the bottom of the stairs. And I remember, I laugh as I think about it. I remember thinking, really? Not even one step? Like all I've lived and been through, I haven't even made one step on there. And when you have shamanic visions, you can interact with them, kind of. And so I went to go forward, like as if to say, I'm going to take a step and see what happens. And as I went to do it, it was like there was this invisible field of energy that I couldn't see. And I ricocheted. It would knock me backwards. And I couldn't go up the stairs. And I thought, oh, okay, I guess it's not time. Maybe I would die if I did this, or I don't know. So anyway, I kind of was at peace with that. But then the visions refreshed, like the screen disappeared and opened again. And when it came back, on the stairs was the crop circle of a DNA strand. And it was laying from the bottom to the top of the stairs. And I knew, when you have these kinds of visions, there's a great symbolism in them. All the elements have a message and a communication. And I knew just instinctively, as obvious as that is, that you take these stairs through DNA. You don't take them by forcibly walking the way you would normally go upstairs. So I thought, oh, okay, I get that. And then I saw this big cosmic molecule of DNA. It looked like it was, galactic in size or something like that. And as I looked at it, the pattern that I described earlier was inside the DNA molecule. And it was floating around in there. And as it moved around inside this big DNA strand, there were light flashes and things that were happening. And it felt like it was cleaning it, if you will, or recalibrating the energy that was inside the DNA. And then I understood really for the first time what that was. It was this pattern is a pattern. It's a geometry, if you will, an energy that helps to restructure or recalibrate the DNA field, or the connection we have from the energy around our DNA to our divinity, if you will. And so I thought, oh, that's very, very interesting. And it was kind of explaining the ascension process in another form or another way. And then if people are familiar with J.J. Hurtak and the Keys of Enoch and things like that, this kind of information will resonate with you, because you'll understand some of these concepts that were expressed. And then what happened after that was I was led to create healing sessions. I began doing healing work with people knowing about this template, and I was kind of bringing it in consciousness, if you will, to the energy sessions. And then over time, it kind of evolved into 3 sessions that would take place. One was a DNA, called session 1, a DNA attunement. It's called self-attunement. And it's an attunement with your own quantum energy field to prepare you for the energy change. And the second is an attunement to this light template called session 2. And then the third session is a session where you intentionally insert the topic or the focus of what you want the response in energy to be about. So for example, if you're having issues of anxiety, or you're having issues of a physical illness, or you're having issues of a relationship problem, you put the intention that you recognize consciously into the session. And the session, you go through the session with holding that intention to be what you want a response to. And I was doing these first as hands-on sessions, and then I was led to create audios, because it's happening, all this is happening so fast that people don't have time for sessions and stuff, or the money often to have all kinds of energy work. And so I was led to create audios where people could do this work through the form of an audio guided meditation. And so now there's 3 sessions that are available, and it's on an audio where you do them in your own time frame. You do the first session and you wait a week or so, you do the second session, and you can repeat them a couple of times if you like. And then you do the third session for issues that are personal, and then you can repeat the same energy audio, but it put in a new intention. So if you have, you're dealing with anxiety and you work through it, but then something else happens, you can actually reuse the same energy process, but put in the new intention, and it will evoke an energetic response to that intention. So I began sharing this with people, and they were having phenomenal experiences, and that's really what led to the work. And this September, for the very first time, I'm actually going to teach people to do the work as well. So there's a practitioner's training program that's going to be for the very first time in September. And then I'll repeat that again. That one's already full at this point, but people are, but I'll repeat it again, and I'll do it several more times, probably in 2018, so that people can learn to do the work and integrate it into their healing practices as well.
That sounds amazing, and I've seen that on your website. So if people want to download the audio, because I do now I've heard it, we can do that. We can get that from your website. We're able to download it.
It is. It's available on the website. If you go to my website, it's www.drjohnryan.org. You probably have a link.
I have a link on your page on the.
There's at the top. There's tabs, and one of them is a Unity Field Healing section. So if you tab into that area, it's specific to the information on Unity Field Healing, and there's a store where you can. They're very affordable. It's only $65 Canadian, so about probably £55 or something like that, or 50 euros for the whole 3 series, so people can access it easy. And then you put it into your phone, or however you like to use your audios, and then in your own meditative space, and you have time, and you're not going to be interrupted, you can do the work in the sanctity of your own healing space. So it's really nice.
Well, I'm sold. I really am. Well, oh gosh, thank you so much. We are sadly out of time. I could have talked to you for a good another hour. And really, thank you so much for sharing that. It was fascinating, and it's a lot of stuff that I know as well. And I'm so happy that I've been able to share that to people through the summit.
Oh, brilliant! Good.
That's just. So thank you again. I really enjoyed that.
It's really been my pleasure, Julia, and blessings to all your listeners and to everybody who tunes into our audio here today.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
My pleasure.
Okay, bye.